Now, a really fascinating question is to ask whether we can improve our learning and improve our enjoyment of learning by knowing more about our emotions. And in this video today, we're going to answer just that. And as usual, being the maths nerd that I am, I'm going to start off by drawing a graph. So I'm going to draw it in standard colour of black and just draw the x-axis here, the y-axis, and now the x-axis, and on the bottom we're going to put time, and on the top we're going to put difficulty. So we're going to look at things that we're learning, and on this axis we're going to put how difficult they are or how challenging they are. And on our x-axis I'm just going to put 2 points of time. One's going to be now and one's going to be later. And that later could be a month or 3 months or whatever, just a significant period of time. Now, the first thing we need to do is decide that what things are going to be too easy on our challenging or difficulty axis, and below this line here I'm going to say that things are too easy. So we can easily think of things that fit into that category, stuff like 1 plus 1 equals 2, things like walking. And if I asked you to do those things, most people would find them too easy. The other end of the scale, and we'll change colour here so we can put them in, say, red, and on that scale we'll put another level of difficulty where we would think that above that level things are too hard, and not too difficult to think of things like that. Surgery would be hard for most people. Calculus, a lot of people find difficult. Flying an aeroplane would be difficult for most people. Whereas down here, things like walking, chewing gum are far too easy. Gum, not. And it is true that some people find walking and chewing gum difficult to do at the same time, but that's another conversation. Now in the middle, of course, we have this band. Now notice that this band is not just one single point. There is actually a lot of leeway in between, and this is obviously called the just right zone, or the Goldilocks zone, but the positive psychologists prefer to call it something else, and they've entitled this the flow zone, because what they've discovered is that people who spend their time in this zone experience a feeling of flow. Whereas when they're up here in the too hard zone, they'll feel things like frustration. They'll feel things like anger, or they might feel like crying. They certainly feel like giving up. Other people have reported that they feel silly or incompetent, or some people even feel hopeless when they're doing things in this too hard zone. The overwhelming thing that people experience in here is a very strong feeling of time dragging. Time goes really, really slow because you're not really engaged in what's going on, and you're noticing every minute as it drags along. And similarly, down here in the too easy zone, most people will experience certain feelings like boredom. I am so bored. This is so boring. Or they will feel cheesed off. Some of my students complain that they're cheesed off with their teachers because their classes are so boring because they're too easy. Some people report feeling sleepy during these too easy exercise or too easy activities. They certainly feel that it's not fun And again, overwhelmingly, in this zone, time very much drags. It's not a good place to be. In contrast, though, in the flow zone, people report feeling totally different emotions. They report feeling emotions like excited. They feel passionate when they're in this zone. Lots of people say they feel energized. I personally feel really curious when I'm in this zone. I certainly feel passionate. The overwhelming thing that people say about this zone is that when they're in this state of flow, time flies or time flows. Now we started off by asking the question, how can our emotions impact our learning? Well, the very interesting and useful outcome of this research that the positive psychologists have done is this. Notice that this line that goes up here, the line that, or this channel of the flow zone, is not horizontal. It's actually going uphill. It's going up in what I call the learning curve. Because when you spend most of your time in this zone, I'll just get a different colour so that it doesn't sort of interfere with anything. When you spend most of your time working in this zone or learning in this zone, you might go a little bit challenging sometimes or a little bit easy other times. When you spend most of your time in this zone, a really interesting thing happens. The channel goes uphill. These lines go uphill over time. So let's see what this does. If we picked a point now on our timeline here, and we said now, and we picked a task that was up there about this difficult, that was in our too hard zone. So it belongs there. So it's now on the x-axis, and it's about this difficult on the y-axis. And that's in our too hard zone now. But in later, 3 months' time, if we're spending most of our time in this flow zone, what will happen sometime later is that the degree of difficulty of that task, that might be, playing the piano or doing algebra or something, the degree of difficulty doesn't change over time because the task is the task. I mean, it doesn't get any harder, it doesn't get easier, it just is what it is. But over time, if you're in this curve, you're in this flow zone, and you're in this learning curve, that task is now in your flow zone. It's now in your just right zone, whereas before it was in the too hard zone. And that that indicates that you've actually learned something, you've actually got better. And in a similar way, let's try a different colour, let's try pink this time. If we pick something that was in our flow zone this time, at now, so it was in our flow zone, we're comfortable with it. It might be something like the level of maths you're doing at school, or in my case it might be doing a jumping front kick in Taekwondo because I'm fairly comfortable with that. It's in my flow zone. I could always get better at it, and that's about this difficult. So it's about this far on the y-axis. And in time, it'll be the same difficulty. It won't get any harder because it is what it is. But later, if I've been spending most of my time in the flow zone, well, my difficulty level, my challenge level, has actually gone up. So it's now in my too easy zone. Again, indicating that I've learned something. So why is this important? Well, I'm sure you can see. If you are feeling frustrated and you have got the emotional intelligence to know how you feel at a certain time, so you can say, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling angry, I feel like giving up, or time is really dragging, that's probably because your emotions are telling you that you're in the too hard zone. And the simple solution, let's change this colour so it makes a bigger statement. The simple solution, go down a level so that you are in the flow zone. Just in the same way that if you are feeling bored, you're cheesed off, you're feeling like going to sleep, you're not having fun, time is dragging, that's probably your emotions telling you that you really need to get back up into the flow zone. Give yourself more of a challenge. try something harder, something that pushes you a little bit further. Not too much that you go over here, because going over here is okay now and again, just to stretch yourself a bit, just like it's okay to go into the too easy zone, just have a bit of a bludge now and again. But spend most of your time in this zone here when you're in the flow zone, because that's where you're going to spend. That's where you're going to get most benefit. And it makes sense, because if you want to feel frustrated and angry and feel like crying all the time, well, you spend your time up here. But if you want to spend your time, or if you want to feel excited and passionate and curious more often than not, then you'd spend most of your time in your flow zone, giving yourself a bit of a challenge, but not too much of a challenge that you get cheesed off. Now, in our next video, we are going to consider this question. What is the difference between this statement? This is boring. This is a statement I hear all the time from my students. Now I want you to compare that statement to this statement. I am bored. And as we'll see, there's a very distinct but very important difference between these two statements, and we'll look at that in our next video when we look more at how best we can learn. See you in the next video.